Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ramadan Mubarak. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Healthy Muslim in Ramadan. We're exploring this great treasure of what we can discover during Ramadan about who we are and how we can keep our bodies and our hearts alive better in the service of Allah. Our emotional state is really important. I liken the self to the driver of the motor car that is your body. You've been given a Ferrari. There are two different people that get behind the wheel of a Ferrari. A racing driver, you might think, he's going to wreck the car. Actually, he doesn't, because a racing driver understands the engine, and his skill is to get the maximum performance out of that engine and to enable the engine to be in balance for the next time he drives the car. Your teenage son is a bit different. He just wants to burn the tarmac off the road, and he drives it badly, and the car blows up. Our self can be either a racing driver or a teenager. Sadly, sometimes we're a teenager, and we've got to learn how to become a racing driver. How do we know who we are? At a simple human level. I'm not talking about Tawheed and our relationship with Allah and our spiritual self. I'm talking about our ordinary, simple human self. Many of us, the way we know ourselves starts when we're very, very young. Somewhere around about the age of 4 or 5. We have very little memory before then. But you meet a 2-year-old, you'll have a rich conversation with them. 2-year-olds know perfectly well who they are. They have opinions. They'll give them to you whether you ask for them or not. And they make very accurate observations of the world around them. But you don't remember what it was like to be 2 or 3. Human memory doesn't encompass that area of time. And so you emerge at the age of 4 or 5 with a sense of, this is who I am, without knowing what has gone on to create that person. Any primary school teacher will tell you that out of 50 pupils she has in a new school year, she will see a very wide range of personalities. These children are not responsible for their personalities. They're only 5 years old. Some of it will be genetic. Some of it will be parenting. Some of these kids will be smart, confident. Some will be kind, helpful. Some will be bullies. Some will be downright dangerous and attack other children. How did they come to be like this? It isn't the child's fault how he is at the age of 5. He's not responsible. So parenting in the early years is the most important thing that happens to the child. And I'm not going to blame parents. We get the parents we get, and we love them. We are the parents we are, and we fail. That's the point of being human. We learn from our mistakes endlessly, and that is called spiritual intelligence. But some of the characteristics that through education we find ourselves with as young adults may not necessarily be to our good. And a confident, outgoing child who is sensitive, kind to others, thoughtful to their parents, top of their class, but nevertheless helping the others not doing so well. This is your model kid. They don't have a problem. They have a strong sense of who they are, and good, loving parents, and they're going to become a person who will make a contribution to life and be able to give out into the larger world. But many people emerge from childhood without that. They emerge with different things. Some emerge with fear. Some emerge with shame. Some emerge with desperate anxiety. Some emerge with depression. Many things can have caused these faults, and I call them faults, in the human personality. I call them faults because they don't represent the best of what that person can be. Now, if you find yourself as a young person with some of these traits, you can ask for help, or you might not find that help is available, and you have to deal with them as you can. Some people deal with them in silence, and in the silence, the pain, the misery, eats in to the fabric of who they are, influences their choices in life in a way that doesn't represent the best of what they're capable. We were talking a little bit before about food, and some people who end up, for one reason or another, either from culture or from personality problems, they end up overweight. And they have this as a problem to handle. I remember a woman who was in a study I was doing on weight reduction, and she had been a factory worker and was currently unemployed, which was why she had time to do the study. And she had simple clothes. She was a woman of she didn't have much means. She didn't have money. And I noticed in one of the breaks she was reading a newspaper called The Guardian. Now, The Guardian is a newspaper that is kind of read by the more intelligent people in our society, and it's certainly not the sort of newspaper I would expect a person who had left school at the age of 15 to read. So, on a pretext, I did a test of intelligence, trying to see how food deprivation affected attention. I found she was the brightest person in the group. Not only was she more intelligent than anyone in the dieting group, she was more intelligent than me, and she was more intelligent than my colleague, who was also more intelligent than me. So she was the brightest person in the group. She was someone who had left school at 15, and she had buried herself in a factory where she didn't have to speak. How come? Her mother had told her she was ugly and worthless, that she would never marry, and the only thing she could do would be to work in a factory. Her mother did not recognize that she was a very beautiful woman, and her mother wanted her to fail. She has to forgive her mother, and she has to become who she is. We got her into an open university course. She lost her weight. She found an extremely nice man who recognized her worth. She married and was happily ever after. That is a story of emerging from childhood with something which you have held on to so that you don't harm other people with it. What happens if you have the same problem, but you impose it on others? People can emerge from childhood with a sense of worthlessness or something. What do? They blame everybody else. In a team, they're always critical. They're always critical of others. Nothing's ever right. and they dump it on other people. These characteristics of the human personality, we're not necessarily responsible for because they occurred from our upbringing, but we are responsible for what we do with them. If we bury them, we can harm our bodies. If we dump them on other people, we can become tense and angry, and we can even provoke harm from other people because we're such unpleasant people. We are responsible for creating our own peace and harmony in our heart. Of course, as Muslims, we have the perfect psychotherapist in Allah. We only have to surrender everything to him, and we will find our answers, and we will find our path to uncover the real person that we are. Please join me after the break. This is really interesting. Thank you. Welcome back. Self-knowledge. This is integral to the spiritual path. As you emerge into childhood, unless you've got spectacularly wonderful parents, you may not be the perfect person, and you may not understand quite how you're put together. You may find yourself in trouble, making poor friendships, seeking the wrong company, working too hard, not being confident to work at all. There's a legion of patterns of behavior which, when you see them in others, you'll think, hey, that person's in trouble. What's going on here? And in others, you want to help them. If it's happening in yourself, you may be less conscious, but you may be aware that somehow you're troubled, somehow you feel yourself to be in the dark. You have a fear, you have a shame, you have a complexity that you can't quite put your finger on, and you don't know where you are. How does this person achieve self-knowledge and achieve wisdom? In the old days, by which I mean in Islamic times, in the times after the Prophet, early Islamic medicine recognized the importance, the real importance of helping people who are emotionally troubled. The first ever mental hospital was in Cairo, and I wish mental hospitals were now on the same model. There was space, there was flowing water, there was comfort, there was excellent food, there was very good lute music, there was massage with fragrant oils, and there were 10 attendants with every person. Somehow, I'm going to find a symptom to make sure I qualify to go. I would love to go to a hospital like that. In the wisdom of those times, they understood that troubled people were suffering from spiritual illnesses. Sometimes they call them devils. I have a feeling that the term devil might have applied to the disorders we now understand as schizophrenia or other types of biochemical disorder. But even within a severely disturbed person with these disorders, there is a real person who can be reached in their humanity. A person can be both schizophrenic and hallucinating and powerfully relate to you very clearly. In Western times, we talk about psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is the big wisdom of the age. It's a wisdom because we're in trouble. We're in trouble because our society is bringing us up in a very strange way, gradually we're becoming more and more anonymous. As computers take over, we are depersonalized. When you go into an office, you see uniforms. You see people conforming to the status quo and behaving in a way which is appropriate. They're not being themselves. They're being appropriate. You must be truthful and honest about who you are. And to wear a uniform of a false personality to please the person in your workplace is not going to be helpful. And is not going to lead you at the end of the day to feel that you have expressed yourself. You've expressed this other person who wore a uniform and became a McDonald's hamburger person, but who knew who you were behind that work in which you expressed your humanity? It was nowhere. You were depersonalized. So how we live our lives and how we know who we are to start with, and then how we express that in our life, our work, our relationships, this is how we come to know ourselves and how we find ourselves on the path to Allah. If we're in trouble, we need help, we need to ask. Do not be ashamed if you find yourself troubled. Do not be ashamed if you are overwhelmed with fear. Do not be ashamed if you find yourselves in deep depression. Seek help. Our Islamic communities should be a place of refuge where a person in trouble can honestly say, I need help. Who can I go to? We have organizations. We have one in England called the Samaritans, where you can call up when you're in trouble and maybe you want to kill yourself, and a wise person at the other end will talk you through your difficulty and will arrange for help. Our Islamic communities should be doing this. Why should a Muslim have to ring the Samaritans? We should be able to go to anyone in our community. We should be able to go to our imam. We should have a section of our mosques for people in need, people in trouble. This is happening slowly. In the north of England, there is a psychotherapist who is starting a spiritual counselling service for Muslims along psychotherapeutic principles. So he will help people to understand how much of who you are can you blame on things that were not of your own making, and how much can you influence by making yourself better with different techniques. It's a fascinating journey, and each person is different. From the many people I have known in my life, it's very difficult to know who I can single out as a person who has touched me. For some reason, I'm thinking of a girl who came to me wanting help with a hopeless eating disorder. She was alternating starving and vomiting, and starving and vomiting, and if she gained 1 pound, she would walk through the night to lose the pound. And she didn't know who she was. She thought she was this body that had to be super controlled along this tiny little weight number, and the weight number was what would define her. And there was safety in that weight number, which is why she had to maintain it. And all of her energies went into that number. And I couldn't get close to who she was outside this preoccupation of wanting to be something she could claim, which meant she ate, and then felt terrible shame because she then immediately didn't eat and exercised off the weight that she had gained, or vomited out of shame that she had dared to ask for something. Of course, I found out something about her family, about how she had been humiliated by her mother, endlessly trivialized in comparison to her high-achieving brother. Actually, she was very bright. But because her mother had told her she was a dummy, her mother had told her she was no good, she never dared put in a good exercise. She didn't try, because she wanted to please her mother by showing she was what her mother found herself to be. To get her to leave that cushion of this false relationship that had been set up with her mother took time, and I became a surrogate, if you like. And we had very strange adventures. I would surprise her and make her turn up to things that she would normally have never experienced. And in spite of herself, she found herself laughing. She found herself enjoying herself. And I encouraged her to feel that it didn't matter a damn what she weighed tomorrow. It took about 4 years. She married. She's got 2 healthy children. She's happy. She's got a life. Her husband adores her. Her children have no eating problems. And she's another number in terms of weight, and she doesn't care what it is. She's got a life. She's free. A little bird that was in a prison has flown free. This is partly emotional therapy, partly spiritual therapy. We have to find our way to that person that we are, that is the creation of Allah, loved by Allah, cherished by Allah. And anything that we have done, we are ashamed of, that we have harmed ourselves, He will forgive us, and He wants us to become this wonderful person that He has created. The spiritual intelligence we must get is the slow unfolding, not just of our human personality, but of our spiritual personality. That is the point of being human and of being a Muslim. Please come back for our next program. This is a great journey. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.